There has been so much talk this offseason about who that third star on the Sixers will be. Will it be Paul George? Will it be LeBron James? Will it be Jimmy Butler? But in all these conversations, do not let it get lost that there is an entire rest of the roster that needs to be filled out as well. That at this current time, looking at the Sixers roster, it is Joel Embiid under contract for $51 million, Paul Reed on a non-guaranteed $7.7 million contract, Jeff Doughton on a $2.196 club option, and then Ricky Council on a non-guaranteed $1.89 million deal. So in reality, Joel Embiid is the only player that we for sure know will be back in a Sixers uniform next year. Now, of course, there are the asterisks such as Tyrese Maxey is absolutely going to get his max extension. We know that to be the case, and there is a little bit of this game being played for cap reasons, for delaying it until there are players brought in just to put these Sixers in a slightly better position from a salary cap standpoint. That's not a guy that I believe is a threat to walk, but there's plenty of other names that we do need to discuss, that regardless of what happens with the top end of the roster, who that third piece is, there's going to have to be 15 guys ready to go from war when the season starts up next year. And we did get a bit of a clue of the Sixers' thoughts on some of the key players that they have to make a decision for whether or not to bring back. I know we've talked on this channel about DeAnthony Melton, how things seem to be trending towards him playing in another location next year. There's been floated out the concept of a 4-year, $60 million contract for DeAnthony Melton, which unfortunately I think is just way too much for a guy with legitimate back injuries and a guy who I really like as a basketball player, but I don't think it would be the best decision for the Sixers to give him that type of money. And now we got news about 3 other players that I did want to bring up. So this coming from Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer, who writes that the Sixers most likely would like to re-sign Kyle Lowry, Nicolas Batum, and Kelly Oubre Jr. this offseason. And he elaborates saying, quote, "Based on the new CBA constraints, a source said Nico Batum, Kelly Oubre Jr., and Kyle Lowry are the free agents that the team most likely would like to re-sign. Not only do they mesh well with All-Stars Maxey and Joel Embiid, they might not command a lot of money in the free agent market." So I do want to talk a bit about each of these guys, but I want to preface this by saying the Sixers cannot make the mistake of just running things back. That, yes, I think they were closer to their championship aspirations than a first-round exit would indicate, that there's a brutal draw against the Knicks, and frankly, they weren't quite ready was the ultimate outlook for this Sixers team. And that's all the more reason why they cannot just rinse and repeat. That what is the definition of insanity? But to try the same thing over and over and expect different results. That is what the Sixers would be doing if we bring back everybody. Now, to that same point, if you do bring in a third star and then you're talking about bringing back these guys, it's a little bit of a different conversation. It's that if we're asking Nico Batum to just be the Nico Batum and not a guy playing a bit above his role, which I think we all can agree was sort of the case last season, it might be a different story there. Now, Batum is an interesting one here because he, of course, took his time coming over from the Clippers in that deal for James Harden. He was a guy who I think was fairly low expectations for coming to Philadelphia, and he meshed far above what anyone could have expected. It's very clear that Joel Embiid enjoys playing with him. They have a bit of that French connection, speaking French to each other on the bench. He's the best entry passer that we've seen to Joel Embiid, and that he caught red-hot fire. Let's not forget that in that playing game against the Miami Heat, where he finished with 20 points on 6 made three-pointers, 5 rebounds, shot 7 of 12 from the field overall. The Sixers do not win that game, and probably are not even advancing if Nico Batum is not a part of that game. It's likely that we're talking about a first-round exit against the Boston Celtics, which I don't know if that would feel better or worse given how things shook out at this point. But regardless, hat tip to Nico Batum for rising up and being ready for the moment. And the other conversation that's been weird with Batum specifically is sort of this common knowledge of he's just going to retire at the end of the year. That's been floated out there for quite some time. I know Batum, when he first got to Philadelphia, kind of toned down that, and I think that him actually enjoying playing basketball in this location for this team could have changed things. But I did want to dive back to the root of where this is coming from, and I did find this tweet from Nico Batum's wife on Twitter here, saying that she, of course, tweeting in French, but is translated to say, Nico decided to end his career, NBA and international, after the Olympics. So this is his last season with the Clippers. And this, of course, coming on August 14th. So plenty of time before he was traded to Philadelphia. And, of course, how things went here, which, again, I think on all accounts, from Batum's perspective and from the Sixers' perspective, went far better than anyone expected. And he is one of these interesting niche players. Now, I know Kyle Neubeck of PHL Sports is reporting or seems to believe that Nico Batum is not going to be a guy that just wants a veteran's minimum. And in fairness, he's worth way more than that. This is a guy that started and played 30-plus minutes in multiple playoff games for the Sixers team. That's a guy that is worth more than a minimum if he's doing those type of skills. Now, to dive into his stats here before I switch over to Oubre and Lowry, that Batum this season, you can see ranked number 7th on the Sixers here. played in 38 games, or started 38 games, played in 57, averaged 5.5 points, 4.2 rebounds, 2.2 assists, shot 39.9% from 3 on 3.1 3-point attempts per game. He's not a guy who's going to be doing most of his damage in the box score. He's an incredibly high IQ basketball player. He's a really good connective passer. He's a willing shooter. That no-dip catch-and-shoot motion is one of the more unique factors I've seen on a basketball court. I like Nico Batum. I would like Batum to be back with the Sixers. And I almost hedged my bet a little bit when I was kind of initially talking about this, how laying out all the reasons why I want this guy back. That because of what a good connective passer is, because of the skill set, how complimentary it is to Joel Embiid, how much Joel likes playing with him. All these things are incredibly important. But I also hesitate for a guy that is 35 years old. How much assets can you truly invest in this guy? And that's what makes this larger conversation harder, is because until the big fish falls into place where you have an idea of what that salary cap is looking like, it is difficult to project these role players. I also don't know how high the market value for Batum will be elsewhere. That I think he fits the bill of a team where Batum is more valuable to the Sixers than he will be on just about any other team at this point. That the fit is absolutely there for both sides of things. So I would like Batum back on this team, but I do have a bit of hesitancy if he's commanding a strong market or wants a high dollar sign. I think anything over $5 million might be a little bit too much for me. Maybe you want to go all the way up to the mid-level at 8. That feels like a lot for Batum in my mind. But again, I would like him back on this roster, and maybe you can talk into a potential 1+1 team option if that was something that would work for both sides, or whatever his goals are, how long he plans on sticking around. Now, two other players that I want to dive into here that, of course, mentions, that being Kelly Oubre and Kyle Lowry. Next up, I want to talk about Oubre. So with Kelly Oubre specifically, another guy that exceeded expectations in a major way. Played in 68 games this year, started 52 of them, 30.2 minutes per game for Kelly Oubre Jr., averaged 15.4 points, 5.0 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.1 steals, 0.7 blocks, did shoot just 31.1% from 3 on 4.8 attempts per game. I will add that he is the most confident below average three-point shooter I've probably seen in the NBA. That with Kelly, I know for sure in his head he believes everyone's going in. And for what it's worth, I kind of do too when he is shooting it. That I have confidence in that shot far above what the numbers would indicate. That is not an outlier poor shooting season for Kelly Oubre. That is just kind of who he is. He's a low 30s three-point shooter. And that is what holds me back for being all in on the Kelly Oubre train. If he was a better shooter, I would go to the bank and give this guy whatever he wants. This is a perfect fit for this team. Now, I don't want that shorthanded in the shooting category to rub everyone the wrong way too much. That there's plenty of good he brings on the basketball court, and that's why I ultimately land on I much would prefer Kelly Oubre to be back on this team, and that's a guy who seems a bit more fitting for the mid-level exception type of money. That's sitting about the $8 million range there. What Kelly Oubre does well, number one, is he is long, athletic, he's switchable, he's versatile, he competes harder on defense than I think just about anyone gave him credit, and that's big why I have this kind of barometer for forgiveness for a lot of his offensive shortcomings, specifically in the shooting category. I'll also take a guy that is still willing to take shots, and take big shots, by the way, that he was not afraid of the larger moments or when the lights were a little bit brighter, still was ready to step up and give his best attempt to knock it down, and he also was successful in that in several instances this year. That there were individual games that Kelly Oubre didn't win for this team, but hit a big shot that impacted the outcome in a major way. And come playoff time, I don't think we got the best version of Kelly Oubre. I put a lot of those shortcomings more on the team as a whole, that I think we got away from what was working so well with him earlier on in the year. And specifically what I mean by that, he found a nice role in that dunker spot. That he was the most effective dunker spot player that the Sixers have had since like a Ben Simmons situation. And the dunker spot at times gets a bad rep where people look at it as you just throw a guy there. But Oubre did a really nice job finding second chance points, getting putbacks, having a little bit of a nice touch, and just his baseline cuts in general were incredibly important to this team. I thought that's a major reason why Joel Embiid had a career high in assists this year, was finding Kelly Oubre on duck-ins and backdoor cuts. That are things that need to continue to be leaned into in this offense, and those are things that Kelly Oubre does bring. So I would like Kelly Oubre back. And that brings me to the tougher conversation to Kyle Lowry here. To bring in Kyle Lowry, and of course we know he landed in Philadelphia on the buyout market after he was traded from Miami to Charlotte, who bought him out, came here on a minimum, and still gave the Sixers some pretty good minutes. That he played in 23 games, started 20 of them, 28.4 minutes per game, 8.0 points, 4.6 assists, 2.8 rebounds, shot 40.4% on 3.9 3-point attempts per game, he gave it his all in the playoffs. And as another guy who I think was far above his role than what was expected when he came here. And the largest reason for that being the DeAnthony Melton injury and him not being an available option. I do think Melton would have gotten the starting nod over Lowry if both were fully healthy, but we were unable to see Melton be able to play basketball down the stretch at the biggest moments for the team, and that also matters in these types of conversation. I like Kyle Lowry. I'm happy that he came home to Philadelphia. I admire that he wants to keep playing. If he can come back in like a 15th man, only suits up sometimes role where he's not actually a guy relied on to be a significant part of this team, I can live with it. But to be perfectly honest, I don't see a need for this guy to play on this team again. That I like Kyle Lowry again. I don't mean this is a major indictment on him. I think if we got the Kyle Lowry of even 3 years ago, I'd be jumping for joy to continue. But I do think the wheels are falling off and that the end of his career is certainly in the forefront for Kyle Lowry. I do not wish him any ill will, and once again, I would not be mad if he's around. It's not one of those situations. But if you're actually trying to build the Sixers team into a contender, you got to have those hard conversations, and I do think Kyle Lowry's a guy that applies to. So let me know what you guys think for those three players specifically. Do you want Kyle Lowry back? Do you want Nico Batum back? Do you want Kelly Oubre Jr. back? Rank them 1 through 3 in the comments, your thoughts there. But that's more or less where I land on. That I think you should lean heavily into the archetypes of the Kelly Oubre Jr.'s and Nico Batum, where you're getting these big athletic wings that are switchable, versatile. We don't need more undersized guards that, are on the downside of their career, even though I do like and appreciate the half a season that we did get with Kyle Lowry there. So thank you guys for tuning into this video. Make sure you are smashing that subscribe button right here on Sixers Digest to keep the family growing. Drop a like button to let me know you're listening, and we'll talk with you next time right here on Sixers Digest.